Thank you for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Tomorrow, we will see a verdict in the SRC trial against former Prime Minister Najib Razak, the first of 5 criminal trials he faces linked to the 1MDB scandal. Now, whatever the verdict, it will no doubt be a landmark decision, as Najib is the highest-ranked politician to be charged in court in this country. Joining us on the line now, we have lawyer Sin Yew. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, in this case, Najib faces 7 charges. That's 3 counts of criminal breach of trust, 3 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of abuse of power. Sin Yew, help us understand some of the key issues which the judge has to decide on tomorrow.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. Well, this is obviously a very complex case that has spanned 100 days or so. So whatever overview that I'm giving in the next 5 minutes will not do justice to the sophisticated arguments made by the prosecution and the defense. So hopefully the respected lawyers there won't hold any grudges against me for oversimplifying this.
Neither will we, Sin Yew.
But just to give a summary of what are in consideration here, for the one offence of using office or position for gratification under Section 23 of the MACC Act, the prosecution needs to prove that Datuk Sri Najib is an officer of a public body. Datuk Sri Najib misused his office or position, and the misuse of his office or position was for gratification. For the 3 offences of criminal breach of trust under Section 409 of the Penal Code, the prosecution needs to prove that Datuk Sri Najib is an agent of SRC. Datuk Sri Najib was entrusted with dominion over the 42 million belonging to SRC, and Datuk Sri Najib had dishonestly misappropriated the 42 million, having been trusted with dominion over it. And lastly, for the 3 offences of money laundering under Section 4 of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, the prosecution needs to prove that Datuk Sri Najib has engaged, either directly or indirectly, in a transaction that involves proceeds of an unlawful activity. And the unlawful activity here is the Section 409 charges, which is the CBT, from which the 42 million is derived from. So at the end of the prosecution stage, the judge has found that the prosecution has proven a prima facie case against Datuk Sri Najib. This means that he must now raise a reasonable doubt through his defense against the prosecution's case. Currently, the task for the judge is to conduct a maximum evaluation based on the totality of the evidence, whether Datuk Sri Najib has raised a reasonable doubt against the charges that are levelled against him. The few key issues, in my mind, which the judge would have to decide tomorrow, is firstly, whether Datuk Sri Najib's role, what was Datuk Sri Najib's role, if any, in SRC International Sdn Bhd, obtaining the 4 billion loan. In this regard, whether his position as the Prime Minister and as the Minister of Finance and his participation in cabinet meetings would amount to a misuse of his position. The second issue is the purpose and the treatment of the 42 million in Datuk Sri Najib's account, whether it belonged to SRC, whether it was misappropriated, if it was misappropriated, whether it was a gratification, whether the 42 million has any link to the decision made in relation to the 4 billion loan, or was it for other purposes, for example, a donation. And the third is Datuk Sri Najib's knowledge or state of mind in relation to the 42 million. Did he know whether the 42 million was misappropriated? If if it was misappropriated, what was his involvement in any decisions or actions pertaining to the 42 million, if any, and were there other parties that could be responsible for this?
Sin Yew, if I could jump in there, and you've laid out the issues quite wonderfully there for us. I do want to ask you, this bundling together of these different charges, does it mean that he has to be convicted on all the charges or none at all? Or could he potentially be convicted on some but not others, or in fact acquitted of everything?
The judge has to make a decision for each of the 7 charges, and it must be considered separately. And there's only 2 outcomes for each of the charges, either to acquit or to convict. Any permutation of the 7 charges could be possible. Datuk Seri Najib could be acquitted of all 7 charges, or he could be acquitted of 6 and convicted of 1, or he could be convicted of all 7.
Okay. And if there is a guilty verdict, what options would Najib have?
Well, if Datuk Seri Najib is convicted of any or all of the 7 charges, the judge would have to sentence him. He could, of course, appeal his conviction. But firstly, he would have to mitigate any sentences that could be imposed against him. And based on the nature of the penalties that these charges carry, it is highly likely that Datuk Seri Najib will be disqualified from contesting as a candidate in any upcoming elections. Any fine exceeding RM 2,000 or any imprisonment for more than 1 year would be sufficient to disqualify him. He would, however, not lose his seat as a Member of Parliament.
Right. So very quickly, in the last minute we have, what should the public keep in mind? It's a very politicized case in the sense that people have taken positions, as it were. What should they keep in mind if the verdict doesn't go in their favor, as it were, not in the way that they thought it would go?
I think the public, especially those who have been following this, they need to understand that whatever tomorrow's outcome would be, it is quite likely that there will be an appeal to the Court of Appeal as how these cases go. So to borrow a boxing term, if I may, this is just round 1, and there wouldn't be any knockout just yet.
Okay. Well, very nicely put. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We really appreciate your time. That's all the time we have on the show for this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.